Hi, I'm Tracey Soltis, your leading health and nutrition coach and molecular biologist. I've consulted with hundreds of people around the world on their human journey. So if you're a seeker looking for answers, information and knowledge, you'll find it here. Come on a journey with me as I explore the science, the physical body, and the cognitive and energetic space of what it really means to be human. Alrighty, welcome back everybody. Today we're going to be talking about the top 3 men's health issues. Predominantly in Australia, it does vary from country to country. So we are actually going to be very specific in talking about the particular issues that come up in Australia and what those look like. And it might sound like a generalisation, but I will say that many of the men I see put their health very low on their priorities list. I mean, everyone's very busy, working, families, relationships, social lives, all those sorts of things. And so because it's, less likely for men to turn inward and see how they're actually going, they tend to be more prone to disease than women. So I thought, given it is Men's Health Month this month, for the month of November, it would be really great for me to kind of go through a couple of the illnesses that men face, what the symptoms of these are, so that you can, check out and turn inwards and see if this is something that might be happening for you. But also we're going to look at prevention and how we can actually work towards staying away from those diseases. And so this chat isn't just targeted at men, it's also for all of my beautiful ladies out there who have loved ones in their family that they know might need that little nudge in the right direction. So we all know who those people are, don't we? So sometimes it helps when we're encouraging and we're supportive and we're giving assistance to other people and just, planting a few seeds here and there. That might be the catalyst that they need to actually go and get something checked out. So today's chat will be about some of the most common causes of diseases. But like I said, we're going to talk about what leads to these diseases, what some of the preventative steps are, and hopefully this will actually prevent us the need to have any sort of pharmaceutical intervention down the track as well. So let's get to it. Let's talk about some of the most common diseases faced by men, and we're talking specifically in Australia as well. So the number one that I've got on my list here is prostate cancer. So we're going to dive straight into it because it is one of those diseases that has a 95% survival rate if it's actually detected early enough. I mean, 95%, that's huge. But it is actually the 3rd most common cause of cancer death in Australia. So that to me, straight away, I just go, wow, we've got a preventable disease here, 95% survival rate. If we go and get checked and we know what some of the signs and the symptoms are, we can prevent so many of these deaths from this really horrible cancer. So some of the alarming information that I really kind of want to, drive home to you guys is that prostate cancer actually kills more men than breast cancer kills in women. And that's crazy, right? I mean, I think we see so much information about breast cancer and there's so much breast cancer awareness. And to know the fact that we've also got prostate cancer, and I can't even remember the last time where I actually saw any information on prostate cancer. So, in order to look after ourselves, we really need to give those men a bit of a nudge. And guys, if you're listening, there are actually 2 different ways that you can go and get tested to make sure that you are not on the projection to kind of coming down with any prostate issues as well. So it's really important that you're mindful with your body when it comes to prostate cancer because there aren't a lot of symptoms that are in the lead up to developing that as a cancer, especially for men, because even when men tend to have slight symptoms of something, they tend to go ignored. And so it is generally harder for men to kind of turn inwards. I mean, that is changing, from an energetic space, but it is more difficult for men in many ways to actually take an opportunity to stop because they're sitting in a space of doing all of the time, and as opposed to being, it is hard for them to actually pick up on some of the symptoms that they might actually be having. And because they're not picking up on those, they're not actually catching it until it gets to the cancer stage. So Here's some stats for you. So there's actually 18,000 new cases of prostate cancer diagnosed in Australia, projected for this year. So we're nearly at the end of the year. So the exact figure so far is 18,110 new cases. It's a huge amount of new cases just for the 1 year that have been diagnosed. Anyway, enough of the heavy stuff. Let's just get to some of the fun stuff about what your prostate is, because this is also something that people aren't aware of. They're not sure like where things are in their body, or you might not have heard of this before. You're listening and you're going, prostate, what is that? I don't even know what that is. So maybe you have heard of it, maybe you haven't. But it's really important to know why it's important and what the prostate actually does. So the prostate is actually about the size of a walnut. It's part of a man's reproductive system, and it's found just below the bladder at the base of the penis, between the penis and the rectum. So interestingly though, an interesting thing that I find about the prostate is that your urethra, so that's where your wee comes out of, actually passes straight through the prostate as well. And this is going to be actually a really interesting diagnostic tool that we're going to get to later. So just bear in mind that your urethra, which is where your wee comes from, goes through your prostate, right through the middle. All right, so what does it do? Okay, so your prostate is actually there to produce some of the fluids contained in your semen, and this is what allows, it's the liquid that allows the sperm to travel through the vagina, the vagina. Let's get my own anatomy correct. And it's full of enzymes. It's got hormones in there. It makes sure that all of your happy little swimmers make it to their destination. Simply put, and if it's functioning properly, it means that you're going to have great fertility. So we know that is actually something that's of great importance, is to make sure that we have healthy, vital bodies that allow us to produce healthy children down the track, if that's something that we want to do. And so having a healthy prostate is actually directly related to our fertility and a man's fertility as well. So if you've got great enzymes in there and your hormones are regulated, the fluid itself is actually nice and healthy, then no sperm are going to make it to the egg, and hopefully conception is going to occur. So it's also there to help push the semen through the urethra when you ejaculate as well. So if you don't have enough of that fluid, again with fertility, the little fellas are not making it through. So it's something to keep in mind, especially for those of you who are looking to start a family. We want to have really good, healthy prostates. A little fun fact for you, that you can probably check out on your own, is that the prostate is actually also considered the male G-spot, for those of you that might be interested. But I'm definitely staying away from that conversation. I'm going to leave that for you guys to look into for yourself and how that all works. So let's get to some of the symptoms that you might have come up if your prostate is inflamed. Okay, so one of the number one things we talked about a second ago is that your urethra passes through your prostate. So when your prostate is swollen and inflamed, you're going to expect that there's going to be pressure on your urethra, which is why it's going to be really difficult for you to pass your urine. So if you're struggling with that, that's a really good first step indicator that something is going on with your prostate. There's some inflammation going on there. Something's not happy. If you're unable to go to the toilet, then you should go and have your prostate checked straight away. That definitely needs to be the number one alarm bell. Also, if you're feeling any pain or burning sensations, if you're passing any blood in your semen or your urine, definitely go and get that checked out. If you having trouble like starting and stopping the flow of your urine as well, that's another really good indicator that there's some swollen or some inflammation going on in the prostate. And if you have any sudden erectile dysfunction as well, I mean, this is all connected together. So it's all part of your sexual health. So if you are suffering from any of that, definitely go and speak to your GP and find out some more and have a simple test done. And I'm going to talk to you about what that test is. So there's two types of tests. There's an antigen test and then there's a rectal test. So the antigen test is obviously a fairly non-invasive one. the rectal test is an invasive one. So that's where the doctor will actually physically check to see if your prostate is larger than what it should be. And so the one that's actually non-invasive, I mean, that never used to be available and now it is, and it makes things very easy. It's a simple antigen test just to see if the fluids are correct. And if they aren't correct, then they're able to send you off for further testing. So it is now non-invasive. There is an option for you to go and have that tested, and it doesn't take very long for you to do it as well. So prevention is key. So again, let's go back to that 95% statistic there, is that if it's picked up early enough before it gets down too far down the path of causing cancer, it is one of those diseases that is preventable. So 95%, which is huge. And so anything that you can take away from this, or ladies, if you're listening and you've got loved ones that haven't had their prostates checked, especially if they're 40 plus, now is the time. Just go have a chat with them, book it in. Guys, if this is kind of resonating with you and perhaps you are experiencing some symptoms, then just go to the GP and have it checked out. It's better to be safe than sorry. Alrighty. Let's get to the second one. So the second one that is it is actually the leading cause of disease in Australia is heart disease. Okay, so let's just take a little look at the biology of the heart as well, because I think it's really important to understand that men and women are both very different in some of the biological spaces that we have, and the heart is actually one of them. So women's hearts are actually smaller. The walls are actually thinner. We actually pump our blood a lot faster than men, and we actually deliver about 10% more blood with every squeeze as well. We also have an advantage of estrogen, which for some reason seems to provide a little bit of protection for us when it comes to any hearts diseases and things like that, although women obviously heart disease is up there as well. We do have a little bit more of an advantage by having such high levels of estrogen going through our bodies throughout our lifetime. So when it comes to stress, it's important to understand that stress responses for men and for women are actually very different. So women, when we are stressed, our pulse rate actually increases and our hearts tend to pump blood a lot quicker. For men, what happens is that arteries in their heart actually constrict and their blood pressure rises. So just be aware that gender plays a very significant role in how heart issues should be treated. If you do have any heart issues, obviously speak with your healthcare provider, but do some research and get a few opinions and make sure that you understand and completely see why they might be suggesting that you do a specific treatment for your heart issue, because everyone is very different. And gender, for example, the treatments are very different in how they need to be cared for. So if you have any heart disease, some of the things that we need to keep a check on is that is there any pressure in the heart or on the chest space? Are you having any pain in your jaw? Are you having frequent cold sweats or heartburn? Have you fainted? Any of these sorts of things should automatically make you go, you know what, I think I need to go and speak to someone, and definitely do that. And just, look, sometimes we feel like, I don't want to burden the system, or I don't want to, I'm fine. Especially guys, they're always like, no, I'm fine, because they're in the doing all the time, they're always busy, and they forget sometimes that they just need to stop and actually check in with themselves and see, hang on a second, am I actually okay? And when they do that, they realize that all of these little things kind of make an appearance, and we really need to go and seek some medical help for those. So what are some of the preventives that you can actually, the preventive measures that you can actually take when it comes to heart disease? So monitoring your blood pressure obviously is a great one, and it's a great indicator for stress for guys. So if you've got high blood pressure and you're stressed out, think about, the constricting of the arteries in the heart and what sort of consequence that's having in your heart space. So if you're operating in a space of stress in an ongoing situation and you're not allowing yourself to rest and recover, you're going to be putting your heart in overdrive. And so we know with heart tissue that it doesn't repair as well as other parts of the body. And you can develop scars in the heart. And so what happens there, the electrical impulses cannot do what they're supposed to do. And that's where we end up with heart failure. So stress is a massive one. We need to make sure that we're managing our stress. And management of stress looks like a different thing for everybody. It's definitely not the same. It doesn't mean you have to go and pick up meditation and mindfulness, but stress management for you might be sitting at the beach. You might be reading a book, doing some art, going out with some friends, catching up and socializing, going for a run. There's so many different ways. Ice bath therapy, sauna treatments, all sorts of things that allow people to unwind and to reduce their stress levels. So I highly recommend and encourage you that if you are not managing your stress at the moment and you are living a cycle where you feel quite, the adrenaline's pumping, the cortisol's up there, where you find some time in your schedule to work out how you can reduce your stress, because your heart is definitely going to thank you for that. So some of the other ways that we can prevent heart disease, obviously staying within healthy weight range is really important because we don't want to be putting unnecessary pressure on the heart to be pumping all of that blood through the body. We need to exercise. We need to actually give it a bit of a workout. It is a muscle. It's a beautiful muscle. And so we need to be getting out there and doing a little bit exercising, giving it an opportunity to kind of build some momentum and get stronger and healthier. Limiting our alcohol as well. Guys, I talk about alcohol all of the time, but it is such a toxin for the body and particularly the heart as well. So if you're able to cut back on some of your alcohol intake, your heart would definitely love you for that. If you're still smoking, please quit smoking. It's definitely not good for your heart. It does lead to a lot of complications within all of the cells. So if you are smoking at the moment, maybe this is the little bit of motivation that you need to kind of start the transition away from the cigarettes to becoming completely off them. And like I said before, managing your stress. So that's the first two. So far we've had heart disease and prostate cancer. And now we get to one of the biggest ones that seems to be growing exponentially at the moment is diabetes, and specifically type 2 diabetes. We're not going to talk about type 1 because that's not quite relevant to today's conversation, but type 2 diabetes. So let's have a chat about what diabetes is. So diabetes is when your body has difficulty converting glucose into energy. Now, you know that I've spoken to you guys before about the main fuels that the body uses. It will use glucose because it's actually quite a small molecule. It's easy for the body to break down, or it can use ketones, which will only go to when it's completely starved of glucose in the body. But we're going to be concentrating solely today on just talking about glucose. We're not going to go down the ketone road right this second. But basically what happens when you have too much of the glucose in the system, you have higher levels of sugar, you can develop what's called insulin resistance. Okay, so your blood sugar levels are controlled by this particular hormone called insulin. I'm sure you guys have heard of insulin before, but maybe you're unsure of exactly what that is. So I'm going to tell you a little, just really briefly. Obviously, we're not going to get into too much of the heavy stuff, but we're just going to lightly touch on what that is. And hopefully that will give you a bit of understanding of why people develop diabetes, specifically type 2. So insulin is actually released from the pancreas. Okay, so that's a beautiful little organ that you have in there that does a lot of amazing things. It's a hormone, and what it does is it helps your body turn the glucose into energy. It's also involved in storing any excess glucose that you have as glycogen in the liver. So what happens when you eat a meal? So when you eat a meal, so, let's hope you're sitting down and having your meat and 3 veg, but maybe you're not. Maybe you're out having hamburger. So it's the insulin that actually signals to the liver, the muscles, and the fat cells to take the glucose into the blood and therefore convert that glucose into energy. But when you have type 2 diabetes, what happens is your liver, your muscles, and your fat cells do not respond to the insulin that is now floating around the body, and that's called insulin resistance. So basically you've got all this insulin going around in the body and it's going, no, I'm not going to do the work for you, like I'll see you later, I'm on holidays, and the glucose doesn't go into the cells. So you can imagine what happens when we've got all this glucose floating around the bloodstream and none of it going into the cells. We end up with high blood sugar levels, and this can actually affect the cells, the organs, and can cause serious damage to kidneys, eyes, hearts, and brains. It's too much for the body to take. It just cannot get rid of it. And you would have heard me talk to you guys a lot in other episodes about when we eat a meal, the body will always think that we're in a famine mode. It will always think that we're never going to get another meal. So it will never get rid of that energy. It's going to store it somewhere. And sometimes that gets stored in the body through the fat tissues or the organs. But in this case, because there's so much energy, it just keeps recirculating in the bloodstream. And that's when it gets to a toxic level, and that's when it starts to cause serious diseases. So unfortunately, the stats are pretty grim, and the consensus is, pretty much is that we as experts believe that diabetes is definitely a preventable condition. Okay, there's 1.8 million people in Australia that have diabetes right now. There's more than 120,000 Australians that have been diagnosed with diabetes in the last year, and it costs the economy over $14 billion. So it's actually the leading cause of preventable blindness as well, because as I mentioned before, when we have seriously high levels of blood sugars, that can actually damage the optical nerves in the eye, and so we can actually become blind from having too much glucose going around in our system. Interestingly as well, I mean, when we start with all of this toxicity in the body, we can also damage limbs. And so there's actually 27,000 amputations that are done in Australia every year for people who need to have limbs removed because the high glucose levels have actually damaged the cells and the muscle tissues and things like that. Also major kidney issues, but obviously, and I like to go back to the number 2 that we were talking about, which was heart disease. Diabetes is actually the number 1 cause of heart disease. So we've got this cyclical thing happening here. We've got the diabetes, we've got the heart disease, and this continual perpetual cycle of those two kind of leading into each other. And unfortunately, the numbers of people with diabetes is increasing at a faster rate than any other chronic illness, including heart disease and cancer in Australia. So let's get to it, because it is it's for the majority of people, it's preventable. Okay, this is definitely something that you can work towards not getting in your lifetime. And so what are the symptoms? Something that you need to be looking at. And so you might not know for a while that you're pre-diabetic, because you might just be going on about your life and not realizing that the body's storing so far that excess energy. It's storing it in the organs and in the fatty cells and all of those sorts of things. And you might not actually be aware of it until you start experiencing some of the symptoms. And that might be increased thirst, increased urination. You might feel really tired, which makes a lot of sense. You think that you've got all this glucose energy in there, but your body is trying to actually detox. It's actually it's working harder than it needs to, because it's got all of this energy in there and nowhere to put it. So you're going to feel really tired and exhausted from that. You're constantly going to feel hungry because your body is trying to overwork itself. You might get itchy skin or skin infections and blurred vision. And the reason you're going to get itchy skin and skin infections is because you're doing damage to the cells. So the skin linings and the muscle tissues and all of that beautiful organ that we've got in our skin is actually a really great indicator to us that something's wrong. So diabetes itself is preventable. And prevention comes with weight management. but it also comes with knowing how your body works. Okay, so early on you might gain weight. We mentioned that glucose earlier might be the main energy source, but obviously we can have too much glucose in the body. Okay, so we need to understand how our macronutrients work. That's your fats, your proteins, and your carbohydrates, because a carb is always a carb, a carb, a carb. It always breaks down into glucose, and that glucose is always used for energy. If the energy is not used, it's stored on the body. Unfortunately, when we have diabetes, it's not stored at all. It just keeps floating around, and then it causes disease. So remember, again, that your body doesn't know that you can go to the shops and you can have a meal anytime. So it's not going to get rid of that excess energy through any sort of excretions or through the skin. It's actually going to look for a place to put it. So prevention comes down to really understanding how your body works and what foods you should eat. Okay, intermittent fasting and putting your body into a state of autophagy is often a really great way to make sure that your body uses up that excess glucose. Now, obviously, if you've never done any sort of intermittent fasting before, definitely go and speak with your healthcare provider and get their approval first, because there are some cases where this wouldn't be advised, and so you would definitely need to speak with your GP about that. But fasting is nothing new. I know that a lot of people, they go and what is this fasting? I don't know what this fasting is. This looks like some sort of alternative therapy, but nomads have been fasting for millions of years before we even got into this sort of social structure. And so fasting, there was always breaks between when the next meal was going to come. And so the body would store what it needed to, it would use what it needed to find the next meal. But it was, it was never a given that there was actually going to be food available for that next meal. So fasting is something that cleans out the toxins, cleans out the pollutants, clears out some of that fat, uses up the excess glucose, and it is an awesome way of keeping your body in check and making it fresh and renewing it. It also gives your digestive system a break from having to constantly digest food all the time. Your gut microbiome, and we're not talking about that right now, but that is something to keep in mind too, the pressure that we put on our bodies, the pressure to perform in all areas as well. So not just our actually doing all of the things, but what pressure we're putting on the body. And when we're putting too much pressure on the body, it does need a break. And so fasting is a really great way to do that. Alrighty, so what were our top 3? Prostate cancer, preventable. Book in now, go and get a check. It's done. You get the all clear. You don't even have to worry about it again, I think, for like another year or 2. Check with the GP and what they advise. And then if you do have anything that's a little bit odd coming up, at least then you know and you're aware of it. Because remember, it's 95%, there's a 95% survival rate, okay? But it is the 3rd leading cause of cancer death in men in Australia. So just go and get a checkup. Heart disease and diabetes. Like, these are things that are preventable when we're looking after ourselves, we're looking after our nutrition and our exercise. We're living good lifestyles and we're keeping our stress levels down. All of these things are really important in preventing any sort of disease. And, ladies, if you're listening and you want to kind of give the guys a bit of motivation, hopefully you can get them to listen to today and kind of, encourage them. Encouragement and support is always the best way to get people to do things. It's not, unfortunately, nagging and, telling them all of the bad stuff. I'm telling you a lot of the bad stuff today just to give you all of the information because that's my job. But, encouragement, gentle encouragement, love, kindness, support is always the best way. We want our men to be around for as long as possible. We need them. We love them. They contribute so much to our community, so much to our family. And a lot of these things are preventable. And so when it comes to that, if we can get rid of those diseases and we can bring those rates down, how amazing would that be to have our men living longer? So that's what we want in the community, and that's what we want for our lives. So having that awareness, see what works for you. Take some of the preventative measures that I've mentioned today, and, you can always come and see me. So, you can always come and see me as well, and we can have a little chit chat about these things, and I can give you so much more information on how your body works and why it works this way. But also we can put into plan some steps so that we can get you into a better position, so that we are preventing these diseases down the track as well. So anyway, I hope that everybody took a lot from today's chat. And if you have any questions at all, don't forget to write in. You can do that on Insta, or you can flick me an email at hello@perthwellnesscoach.com.au. But otherwise, it's been phenomenal, the amount of people that are tuning in and listening every week. I love you guys. This is so awesome. I just love being able to get information out to you. And if you have any questions, just send them through. But until next time, see you later.
The information, views and opinions expressed on this podcast should not be used or treated as a substitute for nutritional, medical, psychological or other advice by a qualified medical health professional. Hosts and guests on the podcast express their own opinions, experiences and conclusions. And nothing on the podcast should be used to diagnose, treat, cure or prevent any medical conditions. The podcast is not intended to replace any medical or mental health treatment. All information and advice provided is for general well-being and does not take individual cases into consideration. Neither Tracey Saltis, guests on the podcast, or any sponsors endorse the opinions, views or conclusions expressed or shared on the podcast. Tracey Saltis takes no responsibility for any symptoms or consequences as a direct or indirect result of this podcast.